Hello and welcome to Haman Nature. I am Adam Haman, and I'm joined this week in another crossover episode with the great Bob Murphy. And we are talking this week about a couple of incidents. One, a horrific murder on a commuter train or some other form of public conveyance. And a thing our dear leader, Donald Trump, did to a motorboat. Those things are connected, even though they look completely different. And Bob and I drag you deep into the waters to tell you why they're connected and what we should think about these things in these trying times. You're going to love it. Hi, Bob.
Hey, Adam.
So, some people say we're stuck in a rut because we're just doing clip shows, responding to a guest on Tucker Carlson. And other people are worried that we're going to get into highbrow analysis of really classics of the human race and literature, like Batman.
Mm-hmm.
But just to throw people off, what do you say you and I go back to our roots, really, which is talking about various Twitter beefs that you've gotten into over the last couple of days.
Sure.
Our bread and butter.
Yeah, exactly. It's just keeping it real. Don't dance with who brung you. So the specific two things, just to give people a hint as to where we're going with this, it's the motorboating incident is what provoked it, and then that sort of bled into, in my Twitter feuds, into was it North Carolina, that train stabbing? Is that where it occurred?
Charlotte? Yeah, I think so.
Okay. No, that's a city. I'm talking about the state. Where did it happen? So it bled, and it'll flow. And my angst with everybody in the Trump fan club is similar in both cases. That just everything he does is great, and we've been taken on the chin for so long. It's about time we violated some rights and committed some war crimes. So anyway, that's kind of the way it's going to go. But I do think, folks, this will be not just Adam and me venting, but will be informative as well. So on the motorboating incident, what's interesting, and I confess I had recently watched Glenn Greenwald's take on it, and I shared it with you, Adam, and he made a very basic point that in my battles, I had kind of just overlooked. And the way, at least the ones on Twitter that I was arguing with, and I saw, one of my feed and whatnot, were defending it, it was, hey, we've got a bunch of drug smugglers, cartel members, bringing fentanyl into the United States, and the U.S. government is patrolling our border and picking them off before they can come in and poison our people. And these libertarian types, like this guy Murphy, wants to make sure they get trials. Oh my gosh, you're so concerned about the poor fentanyl dealers. Meanwhile, do you know how many people in the U.S. have died of fentanyl over the last X years? So that was going back and forth, and I'm sitting there arguing about trials and blah. And Glenn Greenwald just made the very basic point that, do you folks know that when this boat was first taken out, Marco Rubio, gave a quick interview to the press before he gets on a plane, and he said it was likely going to Trinidad. So why don't we play that clip, Adam, so people can see I'm not making that up, and then we'll bring up some further issues about that, where it's like, yeah, clearly that boat was not about to, make dock into Miami or something.
Yeah, good point. Here is Marco before he got his marching orders from Trump.
Here was Marco Rubio's original claim before Trump came out and claimed the boat was headed to the United States to deliver drugs, where Marco Rubio said something much different.
The President made the announcement and said it was a lethal strike. I think the Pentagon will have more details and other things to offer you here in the next few hours, hopefully.
So what kind of vessel it was? Yeah, vessel.
The drug vessel. It was carrying drugs.
Size?
I'll refer you to the Pentagon. They'll give you more details on that when in the next, I anticipate shortly, probably while we're in the air.
How many deaths with the lethal force?
Again, look, I'm trying to be evasive. I'll let the Pentagon answer that. Suffice it to say that the President is going to be on offense against drug cartels and drug trafficking in the United States. It destabilizes not just the country, but the entire Caribbean basin. These particular drugs were probably headed to Trinidad or some other country in the Caribbean, at which point they just contribute to the instability of these countries.
Okay, and then again, for those who maybe, I guess we can flash it up here the picture of that boat. And so just to point out, folks, in case you hadn't just done the math or thought about, pictured a map. So Venezuela to Trinidad is like 7 miles. Venezuela to Port Everglades, I think, is what the AIer told me was the closest way to get to the United States. That's something like 1,774 nautical miles, which is 2,000 plus, normal conventional miles, whichever one you want to use. And so the question is, in that boat that you saw that footage of, did that look like those guys were stocked up and ready to go 1,700 plus nautical miles, or did it look like they were going to Trinidad or another little island in the Caribbean, like Marco Rubio originally said when he first was briefed on this? I think it's pretty obvious. And so I brought that up just in preparation for this discussion with you, Adam. I tweeted all that stuff out with at least an hour lead time just to see, is there something I'm missing? And it was a bunch, the few Trump people who came in to tell me I was an idiot. One said that he just told me how many people died of fentanyl in the United States. Okay. Another guy said that I was being pedantic and that the two didn't, they weren't literally contradictory. The boat could have first been going to Trinidad and then was going to, island hop and make it up to the United States. And I said, I'm not saying they didn't do that. I'm saying Trump couldn't possibly have known that, right? It's not like the satellite zoomed in and saw their itinerary, because the guy had it, it'll be in Spanish too. And, I don't know if Trump speaks Spanish, right? So that's clearly not what's clearly what's happening is they took out a boat and Trump decided it would be easier to sell if I just said this was coming into the United States. And my followers aren't going to care if I just made that up, right? So that's clearly what happened. And then another, let me put one other thing too here that Glenn Greenwald brought up, and I think if you want to talk to Adam at some point, you can. Just go get a bell or something, I'll let you. Is that, you stop and think for a minute. In more recent times, when we've been talking about the scourge of fentanyl, and especially like right-wing MAGA types who want to do something about it, it's coming from China. It's that China's poisoning us. And also maybe from Mexico.
Precursors from China, the final product to Mexico.
And so I went and looked up, and here we'll link in the show notes page. There is a DEA report from 2020 that's titled "Fentanyl Flow into the United States, January 2020," and it's a 4-page report, and it shows arrows showing the flow across the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, going from China and India to Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, and they're talking about that. I searched the document. The word Venezuela does not appear in it. Okay. And then when I posted that, some pro-Trump guy, chimed in and said, Bob, just because you're don't want to know about these supply chain routes doesn't mean they don't exist. The DEA established that, did it from going from, Venezuela and making its way to the United States, the drug trade. And he was talking about cocaine and heroin. I said, wait a minute, I thought we were talking about fentanyl. So just the pattern here is not a single person actually tried to defend that, oh, yes, that boat had fentanyl on it and it was making its way into the United States. It was all a bunch of, well, it could have been this, could have been that. And, maybe Trump was like within the neighborhood of being right on 3 of those key details. And they just blew up a boat with those guys on it. And then we're just supposed to, come on. I mean, I don't think they would have blown up a boat full of nuns, would they? So anyway, it's just shocking to me just how cavalierly the Trump people don't care whatsoever that we're sure showing footage of 11 guys getting blown up. And, at this point, were they even drugged? I don't know, but I'm not convinced they had fentanyl on board. And if they did, it wasn't a lot of it, because you could see the footage. It's mostly guys standing around there. It's not like there's huge boxes that are strapped down. Okay.
Yeah, the story doesn't...
Yeah. Did you want to talk, Adam? Go ahead.
I can see you're all worked up. I don't want to have you blow a gasket. The story didn't make any sense. Just looking at that boat, they say there are 11 people on there, but it's a drug smuggling operation. Well, which is it? I mean, you don't need that many people. Obviously, that isn't an ocean-going vessel, so that story doesn't make sense. And there's just so many aspects of this. Well, like, it could certainly be true. The United States does great surveillance. It could be true that this is exactly what they said it was. I still don't agree they should have blown it up. But why should we, the public, believe that that's what it was? After years of watching, Obama drone wedding parties accidentally, and Biden drone bombing a minivan full of kids accidentally. You talked about blowing nuns out of the sky. Wasn't it the USDEA in conjunction with the Peruvian government, a little joint mission where they blew some innocent chick out of the air? Like, oopsie. I think this says it was smuggling drugs, but no, it's just some civilian. They screw these things up all the time. And then, as you saw in the clip, the story from the government just doesn't make any sense. Venezuela isn't where drugs come from, but the United States has been very interested in doing something about toppling that regime for quite some time now, right? And there's a lot of oil in Venezuela. And I just think this is such an obvious pretext for starting like this. He blew up that boat on Tuesday, and on Thursday they announced that Venezuela sent a couple of F-16s near a U.S. destroyer or something. And I'm wondering, in an age where, planes have these huge missiles that can go miles and miles and miles, and we're talking about a tiny little area of the world, what does near mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you launch any plane, it's probably near, right? Is if we're talking about close enough to launch a boat destroying missile. So I'm not buying any of this. I don't know if you saw an article that came across the Mises wire on Mises.org, but there's fairly new oil developments that just got discovered off the coast of Venezuela, close to Guyana. And that's a hotly disputed border, too, ever since they were colonies of Spain and Britain. And you've got American oil companies, Chevron and ExxonMobil, that each have a deal with each respective government. And those entities are lobbying our Congress and, military think tanks to try and figure out what kind of regime change we should orchestrate or prevent. And I just have to believe that the drug running pretext is not what this is all about. That just doesn't make any sense at all, especially given when we're worried about fentanyl and it doesn't even come that way. And again,
I'm just confused. Why don't they just drop leaflets of John Locke and they can just figure out who owns the property? I don't know.
Right. Just send down an arbiter. It should be easy. But the people going rabid, the Trump supporters on Twitter, I do not understand why they won't figure it out, that you shouldn't give the government that you love so much power. Didn't they learn anything from the Patriot Act? They were so happy to give the government all these powers of surveillance and detainment. And then, oh my God, I can't believe Obama and Biden are using these powers against us. So who could see this coming? How can you just be in favor of the government will tell you who that person is they just killed? You just have to trust them. And as you were alluding to with the shocking, horrific story of that guy stabbing that young girl on the train, it's like we've been so brutalized with, Soros-backed DAs and left-wing perversions of our justice system where it seems like it's anarcho-tyranny. They don't do anything to actually prevent crime, and they just slap it in your face. And so people who want law and order are so traumatized that they're like, to heck with law and order. They should just start preeminently killing people, and we don't need a trial. And I sort of get why they're so mad, because justice has been perverted. Like, one of the guys you were arguing with was legitimately saying the mistake we've made is supporting law and order. We need to do some other thing. And I
think he said the rule of law.
That's right, the rule of law. Even more basic.
Right.
You do not want to live in a society with a government this evil and corrupt and monstrous and completely abandoning the rule of law. You are going to get caught up in those gears. And it's funny, you and I were just just going over and analyzing a comic book, but this, I get the instinct for vigilante justice, and the law is corrupt, so you need a strong man to come in and do this, that, and the other. But that's just a story. That's just a piece of mythic art. You don't actually want your society run that way. You give the government the power to just kill people without a trial, or just to blow people out of the water in international waters and just say, yeah, I had a good reason. Trust me, you do not want to live in a country where that's okay.
If I were Donald Trump, I would feel kind of whiplashed here. You said you wanted a billionaire to just go in and take law into his own hands and kill the bad guys. That's exactly what I did, and now you're all whining about it, you libertarians.
Bruce Wayne doesn't play golf.
Okay, that's true. Let me just follow up on some of the points you made there on the regime change stuff. So here, this is from what is this from? A Guardian article. The title of which was Top Biden-era Official Warns U.S. Could Stumble into, quote, Disastrous Intervention in Venezuela. U.S. military buildup and attack on alleged narco boat spark fears of protracted guerrilla war in South America. And by the way, partly, again, to emphasize, we have our warships down there near, in those waters, very provocatively. And so that's why I tried to figure out, exactly where was that boat when it was blown up. But again, if you weren't paying attention, you might have been led to believe it was just off the coast of Florida or something. And no, it wasn't. It was near Venezuela. And the articles I saw saying, the Pentagon is not coming right out and saying, exactly where it was and which vessel took it out and everything. But we know which ones are deployed in that region, and it could have been this, whatever, and this one over here, which is east of the Panama Canal, and blah blah blah. So they're all down there. And anyway, this is from that Guardian article. On Wednesday, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, told Fox News the attack was designed to send a clear message to Venezuela's authoritarian leader. Quote, the only person that should be worried is Nicolas Maduro, who is effectively a kingpin of a narco state, Hegseth said, blah, blah, blah. The military buildup in the Caribbean has left some wondering if Trump is plotting to remove Maduro from power by force. Asked if the administration was seeking regime change in Venezuela, Hegseth said that was a decision for the president, but added, we are prepared with every asset the American military has. All right, so again, it's, we have our ships down there. They've been declared, they didn't say terrorist state, right? They just declare the cartels. They have like a $50 million bounty on his head, don't they?
They declared the cartels terrorists, and that was so. Like Trump is pointing to the authorization right after 9/11 to go after Al Qaeda, and I think that's insane. In fact, did you hear what Pete Hegseth said? This is quoted in the Wall Street Journal. Quote, every boatload of any form of drug that poisons the American people is an imminent threat. That's the word they need to cling to, an imminent threat. And at the DOD, our job is to defeat imminent threats. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told reporters Thursday during a visit to an Army base in Georgia, quote, a drug cartel is no different than Al Qaeda, and they will be treated as such. And I think that's just goofy.
Yeah. So here's the U.S. Department of State. I agree with you. The U.S. Department of State. It's got this file or whatever report on Nicolas Maduro Moros. This gives his name, date of birth. Nicolas Maduro Moros became president of Venezuela following Hugo Chavez's death in 2013 and declared victory in an election in 2018. In 2019, the National Assembly of Venezuela invoked the Venezuelan Constitution and declared that Maduro had usurped power and was not the president of Venezuela. And since 2019, more than 50 countries, including the United States, have refused to recognize him as Venezuela's head of state. And anyway, the whole point of this thing is that he's wanted, and they've given a reward of up to $50 million for him, for Maduro, right? So that's... our government is saying that we got our ships down there. Hegseth saying, well, regime change, you're leaving everything on the table. And so in all that context, then, when you see that footage of blowing that thing up, and it reminds me, did you ever see, Adam, the Bill Hicks routine where is the movie Shane, where it's got Jack Palance
Pick
as
it
like
up.
the guns? Yeah. and Bill Hicks is making the analogy with like U.S. foreign policy is like that, where we just go provoking people until finally
Pick
they
it
can't.
up. I don't want to pick it up, Mister. You're going to kill me. Pick it up.
Right. And so that's what I thought of here when the just blows up that boat. They're like, what are you going to do about it, Nicholas? Huh? What are you going to do about it? You going to do something? Because the early reports I saw said that so far Maduro's office has not yet released a statement concerning the incident, and because they're huddling. Because you're right, if they're too provocative in what they do, the U.S. just rain down. Like you're saying, like, oh, if our plane, those bastards, all we did was blow up one of their boats, and now they're flying planes near our boats that are right off their shores. How dare they?
I don't know what you're complaining about, Bob, because for the past several years you've been saying you're sick and to death of U.S. regime change operations in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
This is a completely different part of the world.
I know. It's really...
If, by the way, if that boat even was destroyed, because we got here one Freddie Nanez, the Venezuelan communications minister, who was suggesting that looked like a deep fake made by AI. Missiles don't go boom like that, and that water didn't even look real. I don't even think that boat got destroyed at all. Which is a weird thing for a government official to say.
Well, unless what you're trying to do is not look like a bunch of chickens, but also not pick a fight with the U.S. I guess really that's all you could say. Like that's.
What are you talking about, Jack Palance? There ain't even no gun there. Please don't shoot me.
Yeah. Wait a minute. You're one of those clever land sharks.
That's right.
So let's see. Where do you want to go with this?
Well, while you're thinking, I'm scrolling your Twitter feed, your X feed.
I did remember, but I know what's on point here. Were you changing topics, or is this?
I'll wait.
Okay, because what I did want to mention was Orrin McIntyre. He wasn't picking a fight with me. He blocked me a while ago. He was retweeting. Somebody was complaining. About. I think it was when somebody went up against J.D. Vance. Right, and Vance, somebody, I forget who it was, but Vance said, I don't give a poop what you call it, or something, when someone said this is arguably, what did he call it? Did he call an act of a war crime? I don't remember.
Or murder, I mean.
Yeah. So anyway, so Orrin McIntyre, in the context of that, I don't remember exactly who he was retweeting. Actually, I can look the thing up. I saved everything. He says, libertarians on the timeline retroactively calling for the jury trial of every Barbary pirate. Okay, now I get, why that's supposed to be funny and everything and make us look like we're just these hopeless ideologues and we're just in our own little corner passing around Murray Rothbard's. Meanwhile, the real men out there I'm not a historian, okay? But I went to the Google machine and I looked up some stuff, and the two Barbary Wars, it was like there were actual pirates that U.S. merchants are out there getting captured, boarded and seized and kidnapped and held for ransom. And then the Americans would, in the beginning, were kind of paying some of it. Then we're like, we got to stop doing this because this is just encouraging them to capture more of our people. They would engage in negotiations with and it wasn't really working. And finally, and then at least on the second war, President Madison asked Congress for a declaration of war. Like, he didn't just go in there and start shooting. Like, he was saying to Congress, hey, father of the Constitution and everything, maybe we should get a declaration of war here. So it seems to me that's kind of different that, yeah, there's pirates capturing our people and holding them prisoner, and then we eventually, after exhausting all their options, start taking those guys out militarily. That seems different from, hey, there's this boat, we're patrolling them, we have our warships in their face, we see this boat that we think might be taking drugs to some other country, and so we blew that up. That doesn't seem like the same thing to me.
Piracy, smuggling, these words are complicated. Yeah, I was really surprised to see the Barbary Wars brought up because, as you say, on the one hand, you've got people, admittedly, without permission, bringing a product for sale into your country, ostensibly. Not that they even proved that in this case. They just blew the boat up.
No, it's make Trinidad first. That's what we got to protect
our word
Trinidad.
for it. But, piracy is piracy. That's a completely different thing. I mean, are they so whipped up into this anti-drug frenzy that they think boarding ships and stealing people and demanding tribute is the same thing as trying to sell an illicit product without permission? It's not. And if you want to stop all these deaths from fentanyl and whatnot, we've discussed this before, you just legalize all drugs immediately. Tylenol and Bayer are never going to have fentanyl in their product. And doesn't matter how many of these boats you destroy. Again, I think this is just a pretense to try and do a regime change. But drugs flow liberally. It doesn't really matter what you do about it.
Yeah.
If you want the product to be not lethal, then quit forcing it into a black market where the consumer doesn't have the slightest idea what they're getting. And all the other evils of destabilizing your own morality by imposing a police state on top of a activity that's between two peaceful people. We've discussed this subject to death, but I'm just don't understand these conservatives. Again, I think they've gotten whiplash for what the Democrats have been doing to them with the justice system, and now they're like, no, I'm going to take control of the justice system, and I'm going to do my own horrific version of things, and see how you guys like it. Well, I don't like it.
Yeah. On that narrow point, you reminded me, David Stockman had a great point, too, in response to, I forget who it was, some defender of the administration's policies here, saying, like, oh, these people, pushing these drugs into it, which causes X number of U.S. deaths and blah, 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 and it's time we fight back, and I'm not going to shed crocodile tears over these drug pushers who are killing America. And Stockman just pointed out, like, how many more Americans die of cigarettes. And he said, so why aren't we going and just blowing up all the people that work for the tobacco companies? That's if that's what your logic is, why? And, okay. So and what's funny, too, is some other people were saying, well, what about Big Pharma? Why don't we start taking them out, too? You agree with that logic? And then Daryl Cooper, being cheeky, retweeted that and said, I don't see the problem with that. Right, so anyway.
I mean, you're at least closer to something more obviously villainous when Big Pharma is controlling our government, not the Maduro government or whatever, but our government to, get the taxpayers to pay for this nonsense and poison us with it.
Are you ready for us to hop over into the stabbing one and the importance of trials?
I just want to. This isn't a complete change of topic, but Twitter is just a cesspool. Some of the people that you're arguing with, Orrin McIntyre, and these are reasonable people, and I think they're wrong. But some of the people you're just interacting with, it's like
they're on drugs.
It's like I say this to my wife all the time. She'll talk about some interaction, and how can people think this way? And I'm like, we've always had crazy people that say crazy things, but we usually don't go walk down underneath the bridge to the homeless encampment and get into a serious discussion with people like that. But on Twitter, we get all confused. We can't see that we're in a homeless encampment. And we're talking to some guy who's been drunk for 3 days and is on kind of drugs you can't even imagine. And he's like, this guy's just giving me an opinion, and I disagree. How can people think like that? So don't despair when your Twitter feed gets bombarded by people who say crazy things. They might actually just be insane.
Maybe, but I don't think there were a lot of homeless guys voting for Trump.
Well, no, they were all voting for Harris, as far as they know.
Right. And so them and their 16 dead colleagues.
Exactly.
All right, so the transition, both in terms of my argument online and in this episode, to the horrific stabbing that I'm sure many of you have seen, or the precursors to it on the video footage, was, when I was explaining how, hey, just blowing people up because you think they're bringing drugs into the country, that's not a good precedent. Just if you grant the government the ability to do that, what's to stop them from just declaring someone as, oh yeah, that's terrorist right there? And don't you guys remember how when a Democrat is in office, all of the right-wing militia guys, we're all terrorists too?
That's right.
Are you insane? Like giving them this? Okay. So given that context, then when I'm sitting there and people were arguing with me and saying things like, actually, let me make the point in this context and we'll flip over the train thing. One guy said something to me like, no, Bob, I don't care. Even if there was, because I said to him, well, how do you know those guys were fentanyl smugglers? How do you know that? Just because Trump tells you and you believe it? And he said, even if there's just a 5% chance that they had fentanyl on the board, I'm fine with it because I value my family's safety more than 20 times more than fentanyl dealers' lives. And I was just beside myself. I said, that's not the issue. Because if there's only a 5% chance that they're fentanyl smugglers, that means there's a 95% chance that they're innocent. And so really what you're saying is I care so little about other innocent people that I'm willing to blow them up. on the off chance that might keep my family safe from voluntarily buying drugs from somebody.
And
right?
not just somebody, but those specific people, if I understand his argument correctly.
Right.
As if there was no other way to get
there's
fentanyl.
a well-established route from Trinidad. You do this, and it's going to have a disinfectant effect. And then, as we all
and
know,
my family would have bought drugs from that batch.
Right. As you
and
all
no
know.
other.
If somebody in the drug trade dies, everybody else just says, "I'm going clean." Scared me straight. And so I was making points like that. Let me just use the analogy. I said that would be like saying that I hate shoplifters so much that I go in and I put rat poison, in various cans of Coke on the store shelves. Because if there's just even a 5% chance that a shoplifter is going to drink that and die, that's worth it to me. That's how much I really don't like shoplifters. Does that sound like a good argument to you folks? Am I leaving something kind of important out of that equation? All right, so that's, again, a lot of these people, me saying, hang on, you can't just have the government go around blowing people up. If they said, oh, no, they're drug dealers, trust me, that's not a good idea. So many people thought, oh, you libertarians, you care so much about the drug dealers. No, I care about people who aren't drug dealers that will get killed this way because the government doesn't like them. Like you, for example. Right? It's just shocking. And to be clear, I would be okay. I'm sure Oren, like if he and I were debating this somewhere in a public, like, at the Soho Forum, or it would be civil and, he would have erudite arguments and I would give the counter and, but it was his like mocking, like just, okay, whatever, guys, you want to have trials, that bothered me. But my point is, like, one could say, yeah, Bob, the world's a messy place and a thing like this. And yes, in a perfect world, we'd have trade and there's rules of evidence, or whatever. But, we could see these guys that we got to think that they were tracking them for a reason. And, I don't think they're going to go out of their way to a bunch of tourists and blow them up for no reason. And then, right, you could imagine a reasonable case to be made. But
sure.
The thing that I'm astonished by is how many of the MAGA people, and again, this isn't like two guys. There were tons of people commenting on like big name accounts. And then again, like people like Oren and others saying like, oh, I regret to inform you folks, the libertarians are at it again. They're worried about evidence before we blow up people, like that kind of a thing. Oh, and also what started too is I said, it's shocking to me that the same people who believe that the Department of Justice and the FBI and everybody all like worked behind the scenes to frame the sitting president for treason.
Yeah.
Are also the exact same people who are like, oh, yeah, I mean, if the government says they're drug dealers from Venezuela and they're going to hurt Americans, you can kill them. I mean, they wouldn't lie about something
Remember
like that.
when the government told us about COVID and vaccines and the truth therein?
Yeah. So
another
that's
argument.
Go ahead. But again, my point was, if you're thinking about it in terms of, oh, yeah, there's a trade-off. It's like society's concern for the criminals versus its concern for the law-abiding. No, that's not why you have trials. It's not because we're soft on criminals. Another example I use, I'm sorry, I don't want to lose the thread, was if the government says, hey, this guy over here, he's a serial killer, we're going to give him the electric chair, and I say, whoa, you got to have a trial first. It's not because I'm soft on serial killing. It's not that, come on, don't we all serial kill sometimes? That's not why you do that. It's because I'm afraid of the government lying. I'm tough on government liars and murderers. That's the issue. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, these people are clearly triggered by libertarians, and it's making them say crazy things. I mean, maybe they're homeless or drunk. But two people...
In this economy, am I right?
Hey, two people, at least, in two different spots, said something crazy like, yeah, that's how we got into this horrible mess in this country with so many people being addicted to drugs and dying from fentanyl. Because we listened to those libertarians who let drugs get admitted into their anarcho-capitalist utopia. What? Have we been secretly running this government for the last 50 years and we turned it into Ancapistan? And I'm the one who's drugged out and I didn't recognize it. I thought this was a police state.
Right.
What? We're to blame because we turned this into a anarcho-capitalist wonderland? What?
It was like during the rounds of QE when, I kid you not, folks, somebody complained that the reason the Fed was timid was because of Ron Paul. It was Ron Paul's fault that we were still stuck with a sluggish economy as of like 2013 because the Fed was afraid to inflate because of Ron Paul and his ilk. And
Fed Chair Ron Paul. I remember that era. That was great.
Yeah, right. That, remember when Bernanke would often cite Ron Paul and say, I wanted to buy more mortgage-backed securities, but Dr. Paul said no. It's like Schrodinger's libertarian, right? On the one hand, we're completely impotent.
Useless.
Oh, you dorks, go sit in the corner and read your treatises while the adults in the room are going to go set policy and capital gains tax rates over here. And then on the other hand, anytime something's bad, it's it's damn libertarians making us abide by the rule of law and other stupid procedural issues. Just why don't you let us get tough and show these criminals who's boss.
Jury of your peers. Whatever, pinko commie libertarian.
Folks, let's take a break from the action for this important announcement. If you care about your liberty and your financial freedom, you need to hear this. From October 10th through 12th, Mikkel Thorpe, host of the Expat Money Show, is bringing together top experts from around the world for the Expat Money Online Summit, and it's completely free to attend. You'll learn how to legally protect your wealth, secure second residencies and citizenships, reduce your tax burden, and own property abroad, all to safeguard your freedom. This year's focus is Latin America, where opportunity is booming. Argentina is shifting to free markets, and as an aside, word on the street is that Milei recently told his top lieutenants that they should go read my booklet, Chaos Theory. True story. That really happened. El Salvador is undergoing a dramatic transformation, and Panama and Paraguay are offering simple residency programs. A Plan B is no longer optional, it's essential. So reserve your free ticket at expatmoneysummit.com. That's EXPAT moneysummit.com. expatmoneysummit.com for your free ticket. Do it today. Let's get back to the show now.
I have two bizarre theories I heard on the interwebs about the horrifying murder of that lady on the train. The first is sort of a media psyop sort of a theory. Like when St. George Floyd was murdered by the cops, or killed, depending on how you interpret that event, the public saw every gruesome detail of it. All 8 minutes and 40 whatever seconds, and ad nauseum. And in this one, we got to see the video kind of, but it was, the gruesome part was edited out. And the theory was that you were fine ginning up people's hostility and emotional rage when it was white cop, black victim, but you didn't want to gin up that hostility when it's a black guy and a little white girl.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's the first theory I heard. I just want to run it past you and see if any part of that stands up.
I mean, that's unequivocally true. And I guess the issue would just be what would be what's the benign explanation versus the cynical one. But I mean, I think that's like, how could anybody possibly deny that? Yeah, of course they're not going to play that. And it would, I suppose if I'm a liberal, progressive person trying to defend those two decisions, I would say something like, well, there's a history of racism and the, violence of the powerful against the powerless minorities. And so that's why, police brutality is a thing that we need to address with systemic racism, and to show that, to showcase that's why it was important for people to see whereas, I mean, random petty crime, or not petty, but random crime that's, that's the thing. And it's illegal, and, nobody is celebrating murders the way that people defend the police. And so therefore that's why we don't want to just, provoke backlash against innocent black people or something. Whereas nobody really thought that, there would be riots and, targeted attacks against police officers if we showed the George Floyd thing. Like, I guess they would say something like that. But to answer your question, I'm saying it's not a crazy theory. I think everybody would have to agree that, yes, that is what happened in both cases, and that's even why. But then if you pushed it for a meta, but why, they might say something like I just said.
Well, let's push it even further for a meta why, because the second crazy theory
you just committed a slight breach of etiquette and skipped the why and went right for the throat.
I never took a Miss Manners class. I wouldn't even mention this, except it was this wasn't a homeless person. It's a big influential account. I don't want to say who, it doesn't really matter, but this theory pointed to the dramatic weirdness of it, and the lack of the kill seconds, and the timing, And this person said, I think this whole thing was AI generated. This attack didn't even occur. Nobody got killed. But we're just trying to gin up a little race hatred to distract us from Epstein and maybe whatever's going on in Venezuela and you name
If it
it.
had been on a boat with water that looked weird, that would even... Okay, that one I'm more... I don't mean I'm saying I think that's true, but I'm saying that one seems more plausible. Well, the first one I did say was true. But this one I'm saying, I get the angle there and why you're saying that's kind of weird, right? But is it? So let me just say this. When I saw the original footage, and then I saw the picture of this like gorgeous blonde seeming model.
With a
I thought,
headshot.
I thought this was like some celebrity talking about the case of this, grungy Ukrainian poor refugee girl that got killed. You know what I mean? I didn't realize that's supposed to be the same person. So there's that element that it does seem... If you were going to, on paper, design something that would piss off as many people on the right as possible and get them to forget about Epstein for a minute and focus on this and get into fights with people and go back to their old pattern and take Trump off the hook, what would you do? You'd have this thing, you'd blow up a boat of drug-running Venezuelans, right?
I don't know if this photo is real, but there's a photo that was ostensibly the victim taken, before. Just a candid of her taking a selfie in her house or something, and on the wall of her room was a big thing that said Black Lives Matter, designed to make you say, oh, the irony, darn it, these confused liberals, blah, 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 and then horror ensues. And, I don't think this is a true theory, but I thought it was interesting enough to bring up.
Yeah, again, with all this stuff, this goes along with, so the link from my feuds over the motorboating to this thing was I was talking about trials, the import, and then some guy posted, a still shot of that, the ominous thing where the guy's just about to strike, and that's the thing we all have seen of that train footage, and said, well, sometimes you don't even need a trial because they convict themselves.
Yeah.
So I took that and retweeted it and said, right. And so now the government is going to grab Thomas Sowell and give him the chair because look at what he did to this poor woman. Oh, wait a minute. No, even if you have video footage of a crime, there still needs to be a trial because there's one important step involved. Meaning, how do you know that the person in custody is the guy
is this
in the
person
video?
who did the thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you said that seemingly obvious point enshrined in the Constitution and what we were all taught in school, hands on your hearts when you're singing the Pledge of Allegiance, jury of your peers, they were acting like you didn't think that this person deserved to be punished or something. Like pointing out that you actually do still need to have a trial. They thought that meant that you thought this was okay and he should get released the 15th time or whatever.
Right. And all this thing.
By the way, folks, I'm sorry, Bob, but folks, if I were on that train and I wasn't worried about getting anarcho-tyrannied, I would have just shot that guy if I could have caught him in mid-frame there,
Right.
How could you possibly think that just because Bob thinks that in the aftermath, when the government gets involved and grabs a guy and wants to kill him, you need a trial to make sure that the government is abusing its power? How can you take that and twist it around to think you're talking about somebody who thinks murder is fine and no big deal?
Right. And
leniency.
And that's what I was clarifying because right, like amongst other points, lots of people were saying stuff like, Bob, this guy got his due process 14 previous times.
Do you really, as if the George Soros prosecutors are really, that's what they're doing is due process with the catch and release and not punishing anybody?
And also, though, but like you're saying, so I had to clarify. I said, okay, folks, if this girl's dad tracked this guy down and took him out, I certainly would not be getting up talking about the importance of jury trials and the rights of man and right? Like, I'm a pacifist, so, I don't think that would be the best thing for him. But if she did it, I'm certainly going to understand and not, I'm not going to criticize the guy or something, okay? So that's one thing, right? And that's the issue. Like a lot of people, I think, were starting from the understandable premise that, no, a guy does that, he should not be allowed to continue to live. And then they went to, and that's why, in a case like this, we don't need a trial to take him out. And I said, wait a minute. And then they say, because look at what happened. He was let out 14. Right. So you're saying, hey, because we can't trust this government right now, when they catch criminals, they just keep letting them out knowing full well some of them are going to go kill other people and they don't care. you know what? We've had enough of this behavior. From now on, just grab someone and execute them. Just tell us they're a bad person first, okay? Because we're sick of these shenanigans of you letting out criminals. So just please now go ahead and kill people without trials. That doesn't make any sense, everybody. No. And then one guy in response, no, Bob, we're not talking about this government that let him out. We're talking about putting in new people who. I was like, okay, so when you put in the new people, have them have trials, and if a guy's found guilty of murdering someone on the train, which should be an open and shut case because you got the video, after the trial, you can give him the electric chair, okay? This new government that you're going to install, that's going to be all people you trust and who wouldn't, lie about where a boat was going after they just blew up 11 people.
Who would do that? I agree. It doesn't make any sense. These arguments are goofy, and they are calling for policies I swear they don't really want. They're just saying it. But to give them a little emotional support, I do get the feeling of whiplash. Like I was saying before, these people just feel like the justice system is completely perverted against them and in favor of psychopathic criminals. And so they're really, really mad, and it's making them say dumb things. But I get being mad. If you live in one of these big cities, it's like we say all the time, the police are going to come for you if you try and stand up for yourself, and they're just going to give these criminals a slap on the wrist. I mean, they literally made stealing up to $1,000 a misdemeanor in California or San Francisco or whatever it was. And I get being annoyed by that and driving you into rage, the kind of rage that'll make you call for a strong man. But you don't. You're wrong. You don't really want the strong man. You actually want the rule of law imposed in the way it hasn't been in the last 15 years or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, suppose you were, this part of this cabal of the New World Order or whatever. You're working for the Rockefellers or something 60 years ago, and you're trying to plan step by step. How could we get Americans to reach a point where, as we get new technology, to just have drones flying around, and if anybody steps out of line, it just shoots a missile and blows them up, and that nobody cares about that? A combination of apathy and just fear that, well, geez, if it gets to that point, it's sort of self-reinforcing, because then if anyone does try to object to that system, we just take them out too. How could you get them there? Clearly, what you would do is not enforce standard laws and just get everyone to demand. Hey, we need, we need to have lockdowns. We need to have, what do you call that? Police state, curfews and stuff like that. Yeah. That's what we need. Martial law, right? That's how you would get them there. And so you're just going along, whether this is part of the plan or not. I'm spiritual, as you know, Adam, so I could say that, yeah, there's a sense in which this is part of Satan's grand plan, and whether the humans involved think this is what they're doing. But yeah, that's how you would get there. And so what's one of the necessary components is a bunch of people who should know better would say, yeah, okay, we're going to give up our liberties in exchange for promises of security, because right now everything is so chaotic because of how awful the people in power have been. And yeah, I understand and that's what I mean too, that I understand the impulse. Like, for example, like you say, if somebody's on the thing and the guy just took out the guy instead of tackling him and trying to wait for the police to get there or something, like if a mob said, no, if the police come and arrest this guy, there's going to get, the International Human Rights Commission is going to come in and do a pro bono defense, and the judge is going to be some liberal pansy. He's going to let him out, and he's going to do it again. So and they just, mob vigilante justice and to take the guy out. I would understand that. And, again, I would say as a pacifist and a Christian, that's not what you want to be doing. You don't want to teach your kids to act like that, but I would get it. And I wouldn't sit there and go on for 3 days on Twitter about these reprehensible people, these bloodthirsty savages. I wouldn't talk like that. I would get it. But that's not what these people are calling for, right? And it was weird, too. I don't know if you saw it, but some of the people were, when I was saying, no, the government can't just kill this guy without having a trial, and they were like, oh, so if a cop was there and saw him and could stop him, you're saying he shouldn't shoot him just to prevent him? I was like, how are you getting that? No. and I thought I was contradicting myself. I was like, no, because if you're there watching the guy, you know you got the right guy. He's the guy. Whereas if you just see a video of him, and there's some other guy now that you're strapped to the electric chair, how do you know it's that guy? Like, do they tell the executioner, watch this video a good 3 times before you give this guy the juice, because we want to make sure it's the right guy that we got here. I mean, and what if he says, no, I was in Phoenix, I have 30 people. Should there be any kind of procedure, if you're not going to have a trial by which the person, if he could offer pretty good, compelling evidence to show you got the wrong guy. Right. And so then some people were like, well, all right, you're going to have a trial, but then you got to execute him really fast. It's going to be a short trial. Right. A speedy trial is actually one of the things that you're guaranteed in this country. Right.
Amen.
So I'm not, capitulating on you're right. The founding fathers were wrong. And we should, the British common law has some pluses and no, that's standard stuff. Because that was the other end of the tyranny spectrum, was they would just lock you up and not charge you for a long time. Right, so that's why that was one of the things that the Bush administration did to Jose Padilla.
Still do that, yeah, exactly. I want to pivot back to you called it motorboating 3 times, so relax, Bob. We are going to call this episode "Trump Goes Motorboating." Don't want you to worry about that.
I thought you said we're going to call it "Trump Loves Motorboating."
Oh, that's even better. Okay, but there's a reason we're pairing these two incidents together, because in the public mind, again, they got these people, these Trump supporters, by and large, just emotionally traumatized into supporting the government, just killing people on their say-so, telling you what's happened. And I think it was in that Glenn Greenwald video you shared, where Trump shared a video of these, we don't know who they are, in a desert, standing in a rough oval. Mm-hmm. And he says, look, a bunch of terrorists getting their orders, and drops a huge bomb on them and kills everybody.
Were they the Houthis? Is that what the context
I think it was in Yemen, yeah. And Glenn shows, this looks exactly like a standard prayer circle or whatever in this culture. And I don't know this culture. I can't evaluate any of these claims, but we have the government's say-so about what that stupid motorboat was. All we do know is they dropped a missile and killed a whole bunch of people, and they killed all those people in that circle, whatever it was, terrorists, prayer, I don't know. But again, remember how often they get it wrong and just lie to us. Any male in a country we're invading of a certain age is a terrorist, as far as we tell the public. And they drone bomb wedding parties, and they blow up minivans full of kids, and they giggle and laugh as they blow up Reuters journalists. I mean, that's the first things we got from WikiLeaks, right? Why in the world would you trust that the government is... Why would you trust the truth or the veracity of the statement that the government's telling you what these people are when they kill them? They have a huge track record of lying or making mistakes and covering it up, or getting involved in situations under duplicitous circumstances so they can do regime changes. I mean, blowing up that boat was just goofy, Bob. Do you think that makes any sense? It's not even a drop in the bucket to the drug trade, if that was even what they were doing. And that didn't look like any kind of a drug smuggling operation, for crying out loud. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean...
End of rant.
Okay. Right. I don't know what they were doing. Like, it's not like you could see pigs moving around or something. I don't know what they were doing. But yeah, it's Greenwald. He had some funny lines when he was motivating. He was saying, like, I mean, this looks like there wouldn't even be enough cocaine on this for Jeff Bezos' wedding party. I mean, that
was a big party.
Yeah. So that's what we're saying. So anyway, yes, and I do think that this is partly, like, also too, like with the Secretary of War stuff.
Yeah.
There's, I think that, and this is right when Thomas Massey is, I don't think, in other words, you and I are grasping at straws thinking these things might all be related, that this is right when Massey is trying to do his thing about, releasing the Epstein files and all that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the Trump administration says we need to change the conversation.
Change the subject, yeah.
And, that, whether it was AI generated or real, who can say, but clearly, these two things are significant, and they would, talk about this stuff. Secretary of War for the win. Which, incidentally, the irony there is the original name I liked because it was honest.
Yeah.
And then it was, this when they changed it, they basically switched it to Secretary of Defense right when the U.S. stopped defending itself and started engaging in aggressive wars.
Yeah, Department of Defense is a euphemism. Department of War is honest. I think Trump's doing it for duplicitous reasons, just to distract the media. But I like the change, and it's supposed to remind, or it should remind people, that wars are things Congress is supposed to declare. Whereas, defense, the executive is supposed to always defend us, right? I mean, so
Right. Yeah,
I hope they keep that name, Department of War. It's ugly. We should have an ugly word for it. They don't do defense. I don't think that's been what they do since they changed the name of it.
Right. Then I'm saying it was flipped where I can't find now, because everything I'm looking now is talking about Trump's change, not the original change. But the original, in other words, back when they originally were called the Secretary of War, the U.S. engaged in defensive wars. And then later when they were Secretary of Defense, the U.S. engaged in offensive wars. So it was like Orwellian. But now it's, again, not because, hey, let's at least be more honest. I think it's more just like, because it's more badass to be Secretary of War.
That's how they're playing it, yeah. All right, well, that's about all I had on this subject. Do you have anything else?
I don't think so. I think it's...
Well, I did have one important thing I wanted to talk about. A company called the Swan Brothers that that doesn't engage in war or defense, really. All they do is really, really make awesome, cool merch and swag. And last week I talked about all the high-end stuff they do, but some of their bread and butter is just fundraising and setting up online shops for really cool gear for, like I'm looking at some now, a bunch of schools. These are beautiful products, shirts and hoodies and tank tops and sweatshirts. And you can either have just an online store up and running, or you can, this is what they really are great at, is special events like fundraising or trying to get everybody geared up for, like, there's one here for a 5K marathon for some particular worthy cause by a worthy brand. And go get yourself over to theswanbrothers.com/cross and see what really cool merch and swag and professionalism can do for your organization.
Indeed.
Give them that URL one more time, would you, Bob?
theswanbrothers.com/cross.
Word. All right, Bob, this was great. Thank you for doing your part to fight with drunk homeless people online. Not everybody.
There's anything wrong with that.
Not everyone has your powers and fortitude, but you do, and we appreciate it.
With Blackstone buying up retail properties, residential real estate, what are people supposed to do?
Is it Blackstone or Black Rock?
It's Blackstone.
It is.
I think it's BlackRock.
Black Rock's doing the other thing. Who's pushing ESG and DEI?
I think that's BlackRock. All right.
Cool. All right, Bob. This was awesome and awkward. I will catch you next week. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you as always for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
So long, folks.